Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast.
Thank you, everybody, for attending a functional medicine discussion group of Santa Monica. And our next month, we have Dr. Tom O'Brien, who will be speaking on Tuesday, the 24th. So that should be really exciting. He's a great speaker. He's spoken with us before. He has a new presentation he wants to talk about. So definitely put that on your calendar. Integrative Therapeutics is our sponsor for this evening, so I want to thank them for sponsoring another one of our meetings. And if you're not familiar with their products, they're one of the few professional lines of supplements that we carry in our office, and they have a number of great products for every condition, including cardiovascular. We use their berberine regularly. They have several highly advanced forms of curcumin. Their latest one is Cleerly, and it's super highly absorbable. So that's a great product. One capsule twice a day is easy to take and super effective for lowering inflammation. So I want to say tonight there's some good news and there's some bad news. So the good news has to do with me. I don't know if everybody's aware, but I fell and fractured my femur on Halloween night and had surgery the next day. And unfortunately, it wasn't healing because there was a gap between the bones after the surgery. And so it was diagnosed as a non-healing. But I can now say that it has healed. Right?
Mine's not working.
The mic's not working? Okay, I've got to keep mine perfect. Keep it close to the mic now. Okay, thank you, Bernie. So I'll just repeat. The good news is that it's about me. I fell and fractured my femur, and it wasn't healing. I have a non-union, and I was told I needed another surgery. But in the functional medicine world, we believe in the ability of the body to heal itself, and so I wasn't going to accept that. So I came up with a plan. I found research showing that a drug called Forteo, which stimulates new bone cells, helps healing of non-union fractures. And so I started taking injections of Forteo. I also used human growth hormone, 2 I use a day. And I started using a bone stimulator, and I did that for 4 months, along with, of course, all the supplements, 10,000 IU's vitamin D, 45 milligrams MK4, boron, calcium, magnesium, strontium, collagen, glucosamine. And I can now say that my hip is healed.
Yay!
So thank you. I'm very happy. The bad news is that our friend and colleague, Dr. Howard Elkin, unfortunately passed away on August 1st. He used to come to our meetings regularly. He worked in my office 1 day a week for about a year. He was a great integrative cardiologist. He also did prescribe bioidentical hormones, and trying to find another cardiologist to send some of his patients to, and there's nobody like Howard. So, very sad. So I'm dedicating this talk to Howard Elkin. So this is the first annual Dr. Howard Elkin Memorial talk on integrative cardiology. So let's get started here. So this is Howard's book. And so the goals of the presentation are, number one, to get you to understand more about what is coronary artery disease, how does plaque form, and what happens when you have a myocardial infarction. Number two is to understand the testing, and in particular, advanced lipid testing. And we're also going to talk about some of the direct testing. And we have somebody from Cleerly help to talk about the CT angiogram with artificial intelligence, which is the latest test that allows you non-invasively to see exactly what's happening inside the arteries. And then I'm going to focus on some of the approaches to treating coronary artery disease with an emphasis on diet and supplements. So heart disease continues to be the number one killer in the United States, and coronary artery disease is the number one cause of heart disease. Over 800,000 people in the U.S. sustain a heart attack every year, and heart disease is still the number one killer in women as well. It's common for women to be fearful about breast cancer, but the number of women that die from breast cancer on average is a fraction of the number of women who die from cardiovascular disease. So that should be the focus for preventative medicine. So coronary artery disease has to do with disease in the arteries that supply the heart, and these are four of the main arteries that supply the heart. And this artery right there is the left anterior descending artery, and that artery supplies over half of the heart muscle. And if that artery becomes completely clogged by a heart attack, you're most likely not going to make it. They call that the widowmaker. All right. So what happens in coronary artery disease is that the arteries become lined with plaque, and plaque is composed partially of oxidized cholesterol, as well as inflammatory cells, white blood cells, etc. But what usually leads to a heart attack or myocardial infarction is not that the arteries become more and more and more closed till they're fully closed. 75% of the time what happens is that the plaque ruptures, it breaks open and forms a clot. And so the mere presence of cholesterol does not mean that you're going to have plaque buildup. The most significant factor is that the plaque becomes oxidized and or inflamed. So looking at markers of oxidation and inflammation are super important. So let's see, endothelial lining of the arteries. So inside of the arteries is called the endothelium, and we think that's where a lot of the action happens. And there's a lot of focus in the research on the health of the endothelium, and there's a number of things Johnny, there's a number of things we can do to improve the health of the endothelium. Okay, so here is a slide about the endothelium. So the endothelium is this one Roxanne, is this one cell lining of the inside of the arteries, and if the endothelium is not working properly, we call that endothelial dysfunction. And what that will mean is that typically you'll get less nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is one of the key players in heart disease. Having good nitric oxide production reduces hypertension, improves the health of the arteries, and it's super important. And here's a finger-like lining of the endothelium, those little finger-like projections. That's called the glycocalyx. The glycocalyx is composed of glycoproteins and proteoglycans. And the health of the glycocalyx is super important in understanding what's going on. So here's an example of plaque inside the arteries. And so on the left side, we have, you see the plaque, and if the plaque ruptures, it looks something like that. And this is where you have a calcium fibrous cap on the plaque. And so most people are concerned about having calcium in the arteries. It turns out that if you have plaque in your arteries and that plaque is covered by calcium, it's more likely to be stable, and stable plaque is less likely to lead to a myocardial infarction. So I have a short video here to get you to understand this slowly.
The heart pumps blood to the body through a complex network of arteries. With the exception of the coronary arteries, which nourish the heart itself,
Hear it?
most arteries transport oxygen-rich blood.
Let's see. What can I do? Is there a lead? What's that? To try to Trump with me. Joe. What do you think the sound was like? Cute.
The heart pumps blood to the body through a complex network of arteries. With the exception of the coronary arteries, which nourish the heart itself, most arteries transport oxygen-rich blood away from the heart. Circulating in the blood are red blood cells, white blood cells, nutrients, and other life-sustaining substances. Cholesterol and other fatty substances also circulate in the blood. Over time, these substances can be deposited in the artery walls, a condition called atherosclerosis. The deposited cholesterol, or plaque, can build up over time, causing hardening and narrowing of the otherwise smooth artery walls. When the walls of the artery become narrowed and hardened, blood flow is restricted. As the plaque accumulates, the buildup can become unstable and may break off or rupture. A condition called thrombosis results when blood starts to coagulate or clump together at the site of the rupture, similar to the way blood clots to stop bleeding from a cut. A blockage or thrombus can grow larger, further restricting the flow of blood. The thrombus is also in danger of breaking from the site and traveling through the arteries. The blockage caused by a thrombus can be life-threatening. A blockage in the coronary arteries may cause a heart attack, while a blockage in a cerebral artery may cause a stroke. Blockage in one of the major arteries of the body can prevent blood flow to an extremity or organ, causing pain and tissue damage to the area.
Great. That was pretty interesting. Huh? So, in order to control inflammation and oxidation, this is a list of supplements from Dr. Mark Houston's book. By the way, this is one of the best books about coronary artery disease. I don't know if you know Dr. Mark Houston, but I've studied a bunch with him, and he is was one of the premier teachers of cardiovascular medicine. He teaches for, yes?
You're holding up
both. This is called The Truth About Heart Disease.
Yeah, truth about
Yeah, this is all about coronary artery disease. So there's actually a lot of supplements. I probably take almost all of them. And here's a list of the top antioxidant foods. I'm not going to go through all of those. Okay, so, yeah. Okay, so the top risk factors, these are things that most of us are familiar with.
Can you just stop?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yep. There you go.
Yeah, human stuff.
Sorry.
Human stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how beans are so high in antioxidants. Beans are really super healthy, even though Dr. Gundry says they're not. As long as they're properly cooked. But if you undercook your beans, you'll know it. But so high blood pressure obviously is a super risk factor for coronary artery disease. Smoking, everybody knows about. Cholesterol, dyslipidemia, insulin resistance, and diabetes. If you have diabetes, you have 3 times the risk of heart attack. I'm going to focus more in this talk about some of the other factors, but diabetes is super important. Insulin resistance, even the stages of it, need to be addressed. Physical inactivity and obesity. Now, this is a list that not everybody thinks about, so I'm going to spend a little more time on this. So, uric acid is a very important marker, significantly increases your risk of coronary artery disease. It's typically not measured by most doctors. We do it. I run a lot of panels through Vibrant America, and we always look at uric acid. Dr. David Perlmutter has really emphasized the importance of uric acid as a metabolic marker and not just as a marker for gout. We have fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is an important marker to look at. Increases risk of clotting. The blood gets thicker. That increases your risk. Elevated iron and ferritin. I did a podcast with a doctor who wrote a book about hemochromatosis, and 30% of the population has at least one gene that makes them more likely to store iron. But guess what? We don't have no idea because iron doesn't get measured on most patients. I had a patient who was being treated for anemia was because their hematocrit and their hemoglobin were high, and they put him on iron. Nobody ever measured the iron. He doesn't need iron. He was having a problem. He's a painter, and he was having a problem with lead toxicity, which was blocking his iron. So giving him more iron was never going to fix it. I had a couple of women. A mother and a daughter. They're both vegan. They have high iron ferritin. Nobody measured it. They're vegan. Everybody assumed that they needed iron, but they're storing iron. So start measuring iron. Do a whole iron panel on all your patients. You're going to find a number of patients that need to reduce their iron. And there's some strategies for reducing the iron. For one thing, high dose curcumin. There's a number of things you can do. Sleep, is super important. Homocysteine. How many in this room measure homocysteine? Okay, so homocysteine is an inflammatory marker in blood, separate from cholesterol. It significantly increases your risk of heart disease. According to Dr. Houston, risk starts when homocysteine's above 5. Yes, most of the labs say it should be under 12. After 12, it really shoots up. So we usually try to get it below 8. Getting it down to 5 is hard, but it's interesting. So homocysteine is super important. The way you get it down is with specific B vitamins. Thyroid, anything that causes inflammation. I put low hormones because we know that having proper good levels of hormones is super important for health. Anything that causes inflammation, such as chronic infections, toxins, mold. It turns out that Dr. Elkin, the day he died, was moving out of his house because he had mold at his house, so that could have been an inflammatory trigger. Micronutrient deficiencies, gut health. Dr. Elkin regularly ran stool tests on his cardiovascular patients. Everybody thought he was crazy, but it's super important. We all know, especially in functional medicine, it all starts in the gut. All right, so the controversy about cholesterol. And we have Johnny Bowden in the back of the room who wrote The Great Cholesterol Myth. And it's a question whether cholesterol itself is a factor. Most of the studies indicate that it's only when cholesterol becomes oxidized or when there's inflammation in the arteries that cholesterol really becomes a problem. Cholesterol is essential for all these functions in the body. It's essential for producing our sex hormones. It's important for brain health. There's a whole series of nutrients that won't get produced if you don't have sufficient levels of cholesterol. It's how our body makes vitamin D from the sun. It's no wonder patients in Southern California, we measure vitamin D all the time. It's amazing how many people come in who get plenty of sun and they still have low vitamin D. And one of the reasons could be because everybody's trying to get their cholesterol down so much. So oxidation, inflammation. Interestingly, just to throw something into the controversy, and I'm not going to make any conclusions about it, but we debate what should be the best level of LDL cholesterol. We're going to talk about why LDL is itself probably not necessarily the best marker, but there was a study done recently, University of Pittsburgh, and they found that the patients who were least likely to die of heart disease had LDL cholesterol in a range of what was long-term. It was total mortality, not just heart disease. They had LDL-C in the range of 100 to 189.
What?
So there's still things we probably don't know about this whole situation. Yeah, Bernie?
Poison dart. I was going in the small particle with
Yes, absolutely.
rich.
Oh, the small particle is the one you have to worry about.
I mean, is that which one to see?
Okay, so we're going to talk about this, but most doctors, most cardiologists run what's called the basic lipid profile, and that means total cholesterol, estimated LDL, what they call LDL-C. They just go, it's about this much LDL. They don't count the particles, HDL and triglycerides. And it's woefully inadequate. It's really malpractice that they're not running a advanced lipid profile. And that's where we can come in as functional medicine practitioners. And in fact, if you start running advanced lipid profiles, and we'll talk about that soon, as well as some of the other advanced tests. I have a good relationship with my primary care doctor, and he's happy that we run these advanced lipids on his patients, and I share the information with him, and I help the patients with the nutritional approach, but he can't run those panels because the insurance companies come after him. And I know, it's criminal. It's crazy that we let insurance companies run our healthcare system. It's really not good for us. So you can run these advanced panels and you'll save the patients money, because if they get sent on insurance to run an advanced lipid profile and it's not covered, they'll get charged thousands of dollars. Whereas we can get a really good advanced lipid profile from, we use Vibrant America, and so we can do advanced lipids, hormones, thyroid, nutrients, and get it done for $400 or $500. Okay. So we just talked about the basic lipid profile, and even cardiologists are not running it, even though they should. And the reason why is insurance coverage and time. So they just run the basic lipid profile. Okay, so what is the advanced lipid profile? Well, there's a number of specialty labs that offer advanced lipid profiles. At Howard, Dr. Elkin, he often ran either Boston Heart or Cleveland Heart, and all of these labs have special parts of their tests that the other labs don't have. They've developed some proprietary testing. I'll show you a few examples of advanced lipid profiles so you can get a better idea of how to interpret some of these. So the advanced lipid profile typically will look at not just LDL, not just total cholesterol and estimated LDL, but it's going to look at LDL particle number and particle size. So it's the small, dense LDL that puts you at biggest risk. Lately, a marker that has become more popular is ApoB. Peter Tia says it's the only one you need to look at, and it'll determine your risk. I'm going to show you a slide later on, and somebody at Howard tested who had a Cleveland Heart lab had totally normal ApoB, but is at a lot of risk because they had a lot of small dense LDL and other inflammatory markers. So I'm going to basically be arguing that there's not one marker that's best. We need to look at a number of markers. Other tests that you want to look at, oxidized LDL, LP, PLAC, and MPO. Those are all markers for inflammation inside the arteries. So inflammation is the key. As we know, there's so many different diseases, and it's certainly the case with coronary artery disease. LP little a, how many of you test for LP little a? Everybody should be getting testing for LP little a. I've had arguments with primary care doctors. No, it's hereditary. We're going to test for it. Well, they're in the process of developing drugs for LP little a. And once those drugs are out in a few years, everybody's going to test for it. But now they don't want to test for it because they don't know what they can do about it. But there are things that we can do, and we're going to talk about that. Vitamin D, omega-3 is super important. Coenzyme Q10. ADMA is a marker for nitric oxide status. Not everybody offers that. Unfortunately, Vibrant doesn't offer it. TMAO is a controversial marker. I don't know if you heard about that. There's this doctor at Cleveland Clinic, Stanley Hazen. It just seems like every 6 months he comes out with some other study trying to tell us that everything we think is good is actually bad. And so TMAO is this marker that's supposedly correlated with heart disease. Do you know what the biggest source of TMAO is? Fish. We know how important fish is for health. TMAO is formed from either L-carnitine or choline. So recommends not eating foods that have choline or L-carnitine. Do you know how important L-carnitine is for the heart? You know how important choline is for the brain? So I'm very skeptical of TMAO as a marker, but there's something to it. Okay. Genetics. I'm not really going to comment about this. This is a panel that Dr. Mark Houston developed with Vibrant America. And these are all, you can get this whole panel done from Vibrant. These are important markers. So you see ApoE, you've probably heard it, ApoE3, ApoE4. That's a risk for Alzheimer's, but also for cardiovascular disease. All right, LP little a. LP little a is a particularly atherogenic, sticky LDL particles. It's super important. It puts you at higher risk for heart disease. The trainer from The Biggest Loser, I can't think of his name, but he had a massive heart attack, and this was his only risk factor that they could find. So if you have elevated levels of LP little a, usually above 30, especially above 50, you definitely have to address it. So it's important to know that. What can you do about LP little a? Statins actually raise LP little a. This is more common in African Americans. PCSK9 inhibitors, these are PCO injectable drugs that lower cholesterol, and they can lower LP little a 20-30%. But niacin is very effective at lowering LP little a 20-30%. So we use a controlled release niacin, and niacin is falling out of favor from doctors because of some, quite frankly, bad studies. But niacin is very effective when used in proper dosages as part of a nutritional program. And I've seen patients where their LP little a dropped 50% just with niacin. L-carnitine, 10 to 20% reduction in LP little a. Coenzyme Q10 can help ground flaxenes. And then there's this Linus Pauling strategy. We don't know, I don't think there's any human studies. I think it comes from animal studies, but this protege of Dr. Pauling somehow came out of his research on vitamin C. The combination of vitamin C, proline, and lysine inhibit LP little a from binding to the artery walls where it'll form a plaque. So that's another strategy. Dr. Joel Kahn, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's an integrative cardiologist in Michigan. He wrote a whole book about LP little a. I did an interview with him, so you can check out my interview with Dr. Kahn on my podcast, Rational Wellness.
What was his name? I'm sorry.
Oh, Dr. Joel Kahn, Khan. He has a weekly podcast. It's really good. Homocysteine. You mentioned homocysteine. There's fundamentals of B vitamins, basically ethylated B vitamins and trimethylglycine can lower homocysteine in most patients. you might have to use 2 or 3 capsules a day, but just keep experimenting. You can usually get it down. Sometimes adding extra TMG, trimethylglycine, can be beneficial if it doesn't come down just with the B vitamins. And a lot of the companies have formulas specifically related to this. ApoB testing, so PRTM thinks this is the best marker. This is all you need. There's 1 ApoB particle for every LDL particle.
Wait, go back 1 second.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. You know what? I'm happy to share my slides with everybody. Yeah,
Great.
yeah, absolutely. So we talked about LDL particle number. That's the LDLP. That's where they actually count the number of LDL particles as opposed to estimating it. And it's the small, dense LDL particles that are more likely to penetrate through the wall of the artery and become part of a plaque. Heart attack symptoms. Any sort of pain in the upper extremity can be a symptom of a heart attack. Sometimes patients are thinking something else is going on. They're having neck pain or shoulder pain. And 45% of all heart attacks are silent. Shortness of breath. Once again, I'm not a cardiologist, as you all know, so I'm trying to focus on the things that we can make a difference with, which are, the nutritional and natural things. So there's various forms of stress testing. I'll go about the EKG treadmill test. And there's a couple of other forms of stress testing. And now we have direct artery testing. So there's something called a coronary calcium scan. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
So it's an easy test to send your patients with. A lot of them are guessing whether or not they have heart disease. A coronary calcium scan you can get for $200-300. It may not be covered by insurance, but a lot of labs offer it. And you'll have an idea of how much calcified plaque you have in your arteries. Yeah, calcium is bad, but what's worse is soft plaque. And so soft plaque is more vulnerable to break off and lead to a myocardial infarction. Now, traditionally, cardiologists have run what's called cardiac catheterization, also known as an angiogram. This is where they run a catheter through the leg, all the way draining the arteries into your heart, and visualize it. And that's been done for a number of years. One of the problems with that test is that they have the same patient get tested by different cardiologists. And one of them says it's a 30% block, one of them says it's a 50% block. So we now have a more advanced test, which is the CT angiogram with artificial intelligence. And that's through Cleerly Health. So we have a representative of Cleerly Health who's going to come up and tell us a little bit about that for the next 10 minutes. So let's because it says, let's get
Then it's on.
because sequence of great health. Sunday, that 2 hours, that's the 4 hours. These, but you see me, okay, go ahead.
You already asked it.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, it's right there.
oh, so it is? Okay, when I,
Easy.
Here we go. So
Awesome.
not Chris was by it's just my perfect. This is what it's going to
Okay, perfect. Can you guys all hear me without the mic? I'm a little loud.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Idan. I'm actually your point of contact here for all things Cleerly. I live here in Venice Beach. Dr. Howard Elkin actually was a big user of ours. And when I heard of his passing, it was actually pretty tough.
I actually use the mic.
Might be better. Yeah. When I heard the news about Dr. Elkin, it was actually a pretty big blow to us. We do a case review for most of our patients, for the providers. Pretty much every single patient you sent through, we do a case review with our medical team, and we had our next review with Dr. Elkin on Monday before I found out. So it was a tough blow for us. But I'm going to spend the next 8 or so minutes just talking to you guys about Cleerly. And then if you guys have any questions after the fact, I've got my cards as well, so we can chat about it. But a little bit about the company. So our founder, his name is Jim Min. He's a cardiologist by trade. He focused on research for most of his career and realized in finding in all his findings that he had a chance to really hopefully change the world. And so he started the company with the intent to create a world without heart attacks, which, as you guys all know, is no small feat. But Dr. Min likes to say that if we're successful in our endeavor, it'll be a silent revolution whereby the number one killer in the world simply drops to number 2, number 3, so on and so forth. So he's very, very humble in his pursuit, and the individuals within the organization, we all strive to be the same. And in order to do so, we follow in the footsteps of cancer prevention. So if you can recall back in the day before there was an emphasis on the prevention of cancer, a patient would walk into the doctor's office with a sign or a symptom, and by then we know it'd be a little bit too late. Thus began the revolution for the prevention of cancer. And in today's day and age, if you combine all of the deaths associated with all of the cancers, they amount to less deaths than cardiovascular disease. Now, the reason behind that is because the tools that we currently had simply didn't shed enough light into what we needed to know. For example, if you ran an advanced lipid panel, such as the one that Dr. Weitz was talking about, it'll give you a lot of amazing information about their patient's blood chemistry. Let's say the patient had elevated lipids and you were to work on lowering those lipids through natural supplementation, lifestyle modifications, or pharmacological pursuits, and you were successful in lowering those lipids. The question becomes, okay, well, what's going on within the coronary tree, right? We now hear all about these high ketogenic diets, right? So heavy lipids, and their lipids are through the sky. But I can tell you so many cases of individuals that run their Cleerlys, and their Cleerlys are clean. So it isn't, like to your point, it isn't 100% about the cholesterol and about the metabolic. Similarly, if you were to run a calcium score will tell you how much stable plaque there is. And to Dr. Weitz's point, it's not necessarily just about the calcified plaque. It's more so about the soft plaque. So enter Cleerly. We're the company that can talk to you all about the different types of plaque, where it is, and how much of it there is. Now, we've come to understand that there are 3 different types of plaque. The first is your calcified plaque, which in our software would be denoted as balloons. It's just your calcium, what you get out of a calcium score. The second is non-calcified plaque, which in the software looks like it's yellow plaque. This is slightly softer than the calcified plaque, slightly more at risk for rupture. And then the third type of plaque is called, it's just a fancy term for the lowest density or the softest plaque. That's called low density non-calcified plaque. And so this stuff is the really, really dangerous stuff. We're based in research, and so we currently have unpublished data that suggests that just 1 cubic millimeter of this stuff increases your risk for an event 3-fold. So consider a person that has 100 cubic millimeters of total plaque, right? All 3 plaque types. That's considered a stage 1 patient, which we've talked to you about, which is pretty low. But if they just have 1 cubic millimeter of that to be the low density stuff, that increases your risk significantly. That's basically actually all I wanted to do on the slides. Most of this talks a little bit more about the company and how to actually obtain the results. But just know that from a resource perspective, we focus on education first and foremost. So we want you to understand when you get these reports, you understand, number 1, what they mean, what to do about them from a medical therapy perspective, all the options available, and when to follow up. So we're not the type of organization that just kind of throws something at you and says, hey, good luck, figure it out. We literally walk you through, and every single patient that you send our way, we actually set up a 30-minute Zoom session to talk to you about the results of those patients. So just know that you always feel supported. But that's the gist. Do you have a couple of minutes maybe for questions? Or do you want to? Yeah, any questions? Sure.
So, a doctor in Valley mentioned to me, Brad mentioned that I think I'd be really contaminated Cleerly as well as my patients. And he said, oh, there's something called hurt something. And I was saying not to make you look not look, but I'm sure you're aware of
Sure.
competitors. I'm just so curious what the difference.
I love that you brought that up. So what your doctor was referring to was HeartFlow.
Yes.
So HeartFlow is a company that evaluates flow, otherwise known as FFR. FFR is used in order to determine what's called ischemia. And so from a prevention perspective, if a patient is already ischemic, the answer is the cath lab, right? But from a functional medicine and preventative perspective, we're trying to catch the disease before they need to get to the cath lab. And unfortunately, over 52% of heart attacks are in asymptomatic patients. And so if we're really going to work on stopping it or preventing it before we even get to the cath lab, plaque is what you look at first. Once you look at the plaque, if there's a stenosis that's greater than 40%, we call it the gray zone, between 40 and 90% stenosis, that's called the gray zone. The question is, are those plaques that comprise a 40 to 90% stenosis in one of the vessels, are those ischemic? And does that patient then need to go to the cath lab? Now, there's more and more evidence that show that stenting lesions, depending on what type of lesion they are, don't necessarily prove to actually improve anything other than symptoms. And so people are starting to move away from sending patients to the cath lab and intervening through stents and or CABG, because the fact of the matter is it may just alleviate symptoms for patients that are experiencing symptoms, but it doesn't actually improve things. The things that does improve is natural supplementation, pharmacological pursuits if needed, and then just lifestyle. Lifestyle is the biggest thing. The last thing I'll add to that is it's been 10 years since FFRCT has come out, and cardiovascular disease has not improved.
And
Yes, sir.
so with lifestyle and spot feeds, it may be exact. You for which kind exactly?
It really will. Now, it's interesting. I say this anecdotally because it's difficult to put it in from a study perspective. However, we can give you example after example after example of individuals that may be slightly overweight and or simply aren't exercising or aren't getting enough sleep or are just too high stress. They'll obtain a Cleerly. They'll obtain a Cleerly a year later after losing 30 pounds or whatever it might be, and the amount of maybe not necessarily plaque transformation, more so maybe just the slowdown of actual plaque formation.
Is there anything else the ship is she then suitable?
I would assume so. I don't know 100% the answer to that question 100%, but I would assume so. If you're not getting good sleep, then it's going to be affecting cardiovascular. Yes.
So what locations do this test?
So another great question. So from a Southern California perspective, we're very, very lucky. We've got a ton from Santa Monica to Beverly Hills to Torrance, all the way down the coast. Into San Diego. So again, that would be a great question. Just reach out to me, say, hey, I have a patient in this location. Where do I go?
None of Valley get that way.
We have Northridge, Westlake, Woodland Hills. Yeah, got a lot of flat spots. Yes.
Agent to absorbing her background
Sure.
and she go so meter that you carries down. That's it.
We're close. We're hoping. Yeah, we're really, really close. We're hoping by January 1st. Yeah. That's a question, but how much time do we have left? Maybe we'll take the rest of the questions offline.
Okay.
Let's get started.
Sounds good.
Of course. Yeah, let me get this up. I do.
Do you guys have listed evidence of patients who had plaque reversal?
Yes, we have. I will tell you that amongst the blockbuster pharmacological pursuits that the doctor just spoke about, anecdotally, PCSK9 inhibitors.
Okay.
So your Repatha and then your new one, Leqvio. The PCSK9 inhibitors are pretty much the only medications out there right now that people are seeing actual regression in disease. Once you have the disease, currently with what we know, regression is not the goal, transformation is the goal. It all starts off as soft plaque, or transform it into the calcite. You get regression.
You know how to get the start? Yes. That parental selection. Thank you, sir. Okay, great. So there's a couple of tests that some doctors, like Dr. Mark Houston, I mentioned him. He's my mentor. He uses a test called EndoPAT to measure endothelial function, and there's also one that he uses in his office called pulse wave velocity. And then another test that's often done is carotid ultrasound, and there's actually two different tests. There's a carotid artery ultrasound, and there's also carotid intimal medial thickness. The ultrasound better predicts events, but the carotid intimal medial thickness can better measure the thickness of the plaque. But it's measuring it's measuring the artery in the neck, not the artery in the heart. So anyway, so here is an advanced lipid profile. So we're doing good on time. Really happy. I hope I haven't been talking too fast. Okay, great. So this is a Boston Heart lab. This is one of my patients. So you can see here where there's LDLP, which is the particle number, and small dense LDL. These are both somewhat elevated. There's a lot of controversy as to HDL. So HDL is a so-called good cholesterol. And the reason why it's called the good cholesterol is that ideally HDL can do reverse cholesterol transport. So most of the cholesterol in the body is produced in the liver, and then some of it makes its way into the artery. The HDL can take the cholesterol from the artery and bring it back to the liver with reverse cholesterol transport. But we're still trying to figure out how do we know that the HDL is doing what it's supposed to do, and just having a higher HDL doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen. Having low HDL is not good. So one way to look at it is to look at HDL particle size. The latest data seems to show that all the different HDL particle sizes can be beneficial. So Cleveland has a test for HDL functionality. So that may be the direction we need to go. Boston Heart uniquely has this test that looks at whether or not you're a cholesterol absorber or a cholesterol producer. So here we have a patient who's a high cholesterol absorber. So this can help you with your strategy potentially. So for example, on a natural front, you could use berberine or you could use plant sterols, which help to block cholesterol. If the person's a cholesterol producer, then you want to think more about red yeast rice, tocotrienols, and some other compounds. On the drug front, if they're a cholesterol producer, then you're thinking about statins, PCSK9 inhibitors. If they're a cholesterol absorber, you can think about Xenia. So some of these are other markers. So this is a set of markers for inflammation in your arteries. So we always want to look at HSCRP, this marker, LPPLA2, and MPO, myeloperoxidase. Interestingly, we had a number of patients with long COVID. We found a lot of patients with elevated MPO. And I think this is a marker of inflammation that occurred as a result of the inflammatory result. Obviously, looking at glucose and hemoglobin A1C, insulin. I don't know why doctors don't look at insulin. It's so important. If you're managing your glucose, but you're having to use a lot of insulin, then obviously you're developing insulin sensitivity. Here's a few genetic markers. So this was a patient of mine. He had one copy of ApoE4, so that put him at risk. This is actually a guy who came in was in really good shape, and 40 years old. He was fortunately following, I think it was the wrong nutritional program for him, which was he was doing more of a keto, paleo type of diet, bulletproof coffee, and he ended up having a heart attack at 40. It wasn't a severe heart attack, but it was a wake up call. And so ApoE4 probably is one of the factors. This is a test to see if you can tolerate statins or if they'll be effective. Omega-3s, everybody should be measuring omega-3. We try to get the omega-3 index above 10. I take 6 grams of DHA a day. And I take it with tocotrienols to prevent the oxidation of the polyunsaturated fat. Let's see. What is that? Then I had hormones, Q10, homocysteine was 12. So this is a panel we run for Vibrant Health. It doesn't have all the markers we want. They don't have LVLP. They don't have a few of the other things I would like to have. But Vibrant America Lab, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're a great lab for functional medicine practitioners because they're kind of a one-stop shop. There's not much you can get from them. They have some great toxic tests. They have all the food sensitivity tests. I put together a panel. I have like a male panel, a female panel, and then we modify it. And so this is the advanced lipids. This is the inflammatory markers right there. So you can see this patient has elevated homocysteine and high HSCRP. That should be below 1. Fortunately, they don't have LP(a) elevated or a small LDL, so that's good. Insulin resistance, you can see that here with the insulin 16. They have the hemoglobin A1C of 6.2. Full thyroid, hormones. Sorry, I'm talking about all this. Uric acid, we're always looking at uric acid. This person has extremely elevated uric acid, so there are a bunch of natural supplements that can help to lower uric acid. According to David Perlmutter, you want to get the uric acid below 5.5. So typically over 7, it tends to increase significantly your risk of gout. That's probably what you've heard uric acid mentioned before. IGF-1, that's an interesting marker. So for longevity purposes, IGF-1 is kind of a proxy for growth hormone. So you don't want your IGF-1 to be too low, but at least according to Boulder Longo, if your IGF-1 is too high, then that increases your risk of cancer. But his view is not one I necessarily agree with all of it. He also recommends a lower protein intake. But he says that you want to keep the IGF-1 below 175. Good omega-3s. And so this is a coronary calcium scan. This is somebody with a lot of plaque. A lot of plaque in Widowmaker right there. So this is one of Howard's slides, I think. So this patient, as you can see, they have a lot of inflammation, HSCRP. They don't have enough nitric oxide. Here. They have a lot of small dense LDL, low HDL. So this person really is at a lot of risk. So it's looking at all these different factors, not just one thing. And when it comes to ApoB, they have a perfectly healthy ApoB of 59. So if you were going to follow Peter Attia's recommendation for just focus on ApoB, unfortunately, it's not enough. You need to look at more markers. So that's one should be all on that. Very high homocysteine, so this person really has a lot of risk. And this is part of Cleveland Heart Lab. got the great. Statistics. The gas into the operation. We should dying to see it. Maybe later. But I was saying so genetic deaths. All right. Yes, this HC can happen spend time. And
Close on a prior.
okay, how do we reduce coronary artery disease? So, from a lifestyle perspective, want to obviously stop smoking, healthy diet. We'll talk in a minute about some of the ideas of what the most healthy diet is. Exercise. Everybody should be exercising. Everybody should be doing some form of resistance training. Everybody should be doing cardiovascular training. Everybody should be doing stretching. Everybody should be doing balance training. You've got to reduce the visceral adipose tissue around the heart and the organs that's most associated with cardiovascular disease. Sleep, is super important. Fasting is beneficial. Hormones. I've become a believer in that. We should try to have optimal levels of hormones, and I do think that the research shows that women who take bioidentical hormones are healthier, arguably, especially for cardiovascular risk. It's the reason why women have a lower risk of heart disease earlier on and increase the depth of menopause. What about testosterone? Well, there's some controversy about it, but a lot of the data seems to show that testosterone is safe as long as you carefully monitor. The thing that can happen with testosterone is you start producing too many red blood cells, hemoglobin, and that goes up. If that happens, your blood gets thick and stickier, and that's not a good thing. So not everybody who takes testosterone monitors it. But I think for men, if everything else is healthy, you can have a good testosterone level later into life. For example, I'm 66 and my testosterone level is 1,000. So I've never taken testosterone. All right, so we have the modified Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet has a lot of research behind it. Why is the Mediterranean diet? Extra virgin olive oil is super beneficial for cardiovascular health. Of course, you got to get the right olive oil, and that's a whole thing. I had all podcasts about how to select the right olive oil. The Mediterranean diet emphasizes lots of vegetables, fruits, legumes. Even though Dr. Gundry said no, fish. Is red wine beneficial for the heart? But generally don't think it is. But for a while, it was a French paradox. Drink a lot of wine and have healthy hearts, and there's a benefit. Theoretically, red wine can increase HDL levels. So right now, everybody seems to be down on black wine. Maybe there's some benefits, but certainly having a lot of alcohol is not good. The portfolio diet. There's several studies using this particular diet as a way to reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, and it has specific components in it that have been known to help have more favorable lipids, and those are specifically soy, plant sterols, nuts, and soluble fiber. Soluble fiber was a big thing for a while, and everybody had to eat oatmeal because it's soluble fiber. I do think that fiber is super important. It's probably not because the fiber, and by the way, this is coming directly from Dr. Busey, because the fiber gluns onto the cholesterol and takes it out of the system, but rather the fiber has a beneficial effect on the microbiome that decreases our risk of heart disease. And we're learning more and more about the importance of the microbiome. For example, the most popular drug for diabetes is metformin. And how does metformin work? We can figure it out. And a lot of the data seems to be pointing that metformin has a positive effect on the microbiome. So, and by the way, berberine is a natural version of metformin, and it works largely through the microbiome. Following a lower carb diet can be beneficial, especially for patients with insulin resistance or diabetes. There's some data on the vegetarian diet, and a lot of people swear by the vegetarian diet, and for some patients, it's going to be the best choice for them. I'm trying not to get beat up by memes on my way out of here. Just kidding. So when it comes to overall dietary recommendations, we certainly want to avoid sugar and high glycemic carbohydrates. So those are carbohydrates that are going to cause a huge spike in blood sugar, things like bread, cookies, etc., etc. Ultra-processed foods. Somehow we came from junk food to processed foods, now it's ultra-processed. But ultra-processed foods are not good, despite the fact that I think it was the U.S. dietary guide, the folks that make the U.S. Dietary guidelines came out with some report like several months ago saying there's no proof that ultra-processed foods are unhealthy. Okay. For metabolic health, a number of foods that will help to manage lipids. We know that nuts are super beneficial. You can find studies on a whole bunch of different nuts, almonds, pecans, walnuts. Walnuts also have some omega acid in them. So nuts and seeds are super beneficial. I like to add flax seeds. Buy the flax seeds, organic, and store them in the fridge or freezer and grind them yourself, because flaxseed oil is very highly oxidizable, just like fish oil is. So you don't want to buy ground up flax seeds, and they're most likely going to be oxidized because it's stored for a while. But flax seeds are super beneficial for a lot of things. So in the functional medicine world, there's some prominent doctors that have written some books about sodium, saying there's nothing to worry about with sodium. Salt is not a risk factor. You need sodium, you need plenty of sodium. According to Dr. Houston, who I trust, salt is absolutely harmful to the vascular system, and generally speaking, we want to keep our sodium down, and we want to keep our potassium and our magnesium up. And it's not just because it raises blood pressure, but it damages the arteries, makes the arteries stiffer. This is coming from Dr. Houston. I've seen some data on it as well. I trust what he's saying. So we want to make sure you're getting lots of potassium and magnesium. Potassium, shoot for at least 5 grams a day, and probably at least 1 gram a day of magnesium. Keep your sodium under 1,500 milligrams. What about eating fat? I can't necessarily solve all these controversies, but trans fats for sure we know are not good. Don't eat trans fats. Omega-3s we know are good. Monounsaturated oils like olive oil we know are good. Everything in between, there's some question about. So the data seems to show a modest amount of eggs is healthy on a weekly basis. What about coconut oil? I think a lot of us in the functional medicine world feel that coconut oil is a healthy oil. I know when I was cooking my vegetables with coconut oil, my small dense LDL went up. So I stopped. I switched to avocado oil for I hate cooking. According to Dr. Houston, coconut oil is not good. And the reason why is because it has long chain saturated fat. So what about saturated fat? That's the big controversy. Is saturated fat bad? Was B contributing to heart disease? Well, it depends. Saturated fat actually is, there's a number of types of saturated fat. So there are saturated fats with 12 or more carbon chains that are known as long chain saturated fats. And those are more correlated with heart disease. Medium chain, 12 carbons or less, and short chain saturated fats are not associated with heart disease. So what happens when you take patients and you say, let's remove the saturated fats and let's substitute some. So when you substitute polyunsaturated fats, the risk of heart disease seems to go down. When you substitute carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates, the risk tends to go up. There's going to be vegans that are not going to be happy with that. That they don't like vegans. The wife is vegan. So I'm not the expert at medications. As a chiropractor, we can't prescribe medications, but we need to be aware of them. So fibrates are drugs that were popular. They're not that popular. My understanding is among cardiologists, but it's a way to reduce cholesterol. Most of the cardiologists are going to be recommending statins to start with. There's water-soluble and fat-soluble statins. Fat-soluble statins seem to be more effective and better tolerated, generally speaking. So those are Rosuvastatin, Crestor, and Pravastatin. Zetia is a drug, I mentioned it before, it helps block cholesterol absorption. It doesn't have the side effects of the potential side effects of statins. So Zetia is a drug that can either be added to a statin, or patients who are intolerant to a statin, don't want to take a statin, and still want to take a medication. You can do a combination of pemvidolic acid, which is one of the newest drugs that helps to lower lipids, and combine that with Zetia, and you get a really good effect. Problem with pemvidolic acid is that it's expensive, and insurance doesn't necessarily want to cover it, of course. Aspirin. You know that clotting is a factor, so having thinner blood is probably good, but you don't want your blood to be too thin. So taking an aspirin was recommended for everybody, but some patients have bleeding, and so it's not good for them. So from a natural perspective, if you take enough fish oil, and I take the laktinols, your blood is likely to be thinner. You take a lot of curcumin as well. You can use that kinase, lumbar kinase, as natural blood thinners. So everybody's talking about GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic, and everybody's taking them for weight loss. And if you saw Oprah last night, looks like a totally different person. They really work for weight loss. What are the side effects going to be? I think there's going to be a huge number of side effects because they slow GI motility. That's one of the ways that they help with weight loss, because people don't get hungry because food sits in their stomach. So I know in my practice, we treat a lot of patients for gastrointestinal problems like SIBO, reflux, and decreased motility is a big problem. So Dr. Pimentel has said that testing patients for SIBO who are on these drugs is just horrible. Microbiome is all messed up. Yeah. We used to do IV chelation. It's still done in some clinics. It's a way to naturally reduce your cholesterol levels, but I don't think it's done that often anymore. Yep.
Did you see Peter, at the end of the most recent article, was talking about, which surprised me, how and that was supported by evidence. I don't remember the exact quote, but the PCSK9 inhibitors and statins, he was kind of supporting them.
Oh, 100%.
I
Yes.
he did.
Peter Tia says, he said on one of his podcasts that if you get your ApoB below 40 or like your LDL below 30, will eliminate cardiovascular disease and doing it whatever means necessary, which means statins, PCSK9 inhibitors, etc. So I showed you a slide where a person had good ApoB, but they had a lot of small dents, they had a lot of inflammation. So it's, in my opinion, it's the whole picture. It's not just one marker. It takes more than just one marker. All right, statins. How much of it goes? It's so statins. I think in the functional medicine world, we tend to think that statins are absolutely worst thing in the world, and that everybody has side effects. I know a number of doctors will say that 20% of their patients who are on statins have muscle pain. According to studies by the big pharma, it's like 1%. It's definitely more than 1%. I don't know if it's 20%. It depends. There are studies where they give people a placebo instead of a statin, and they get muscle pain. So it's hard to say, but there are definitely a percentage of patients who are intolerant to statins. They usually can tolerate red peas rice and other agents. One of the things that statins do is they actually stabilize plaques. They draw out some of the cholesterol, and they tend to calcify the plaque. So, as I mentioned, I think a lot of us see calcium and go, oh my God, that's the worst thing in the world, but a stable plaque is better than soft plaque. So that may be one of the mechanisms by which statins are beneficial. I actually heard the doctor from your company, Joel Kahn's podcast, and he was saying you can't reverse plaque, but that if you calcify it, it will look smaller, and that's what's really happening. According to Dr. Usling, you can reverse plaque, and there's a number of studies that have shown it. I guess we'll need more data to find out. For sure, statins inhibit quite a number of nutrients that won't be produced along that pathway that statins block. And we all know about CoQ10, so everybody who's on the statin should be taking CoQ10. Absolutely. CoQ10 is super beneficial to the heart. And often in higher dosages, I heard Joel Kahn on his podcast say, on average, his patients are 400, and some sites 800 milligrams a day of CoQ10. It also inhibits, statins also inhibit the production of vitamin E, omega-3 fats, tocotrienols, carnitine, vitamin K. Medical interventions, as we heard earlier, neither stents nor bypass surgery if the patient's stable. So if the patient's got a blockage in the midst of an event, they open up the artery with a stent, that's different. But if the patient's stable and they get a stent, they get a coronary bypass surgery, it doesn't reduce your risk of death. All right, here we go. This is the good stuff. So I'm going to take a picture of the slide. I got several. So British rice inhibits the same pathway. It's often underused, underdosed. So I just had a patient in my office yesterday. He was intolerant to statin. His cardiologist put him on British rice, but they put him on 1,200 milligrams. You got to do at least 2,400 milligrams a day if you want it to be beneficial. And sometimes as high as 4,800. That's taken at night. And that's usually when they prescribe a statin as well. Tocotrienols, when taken with registries or statin, actually improves the effectiveness. Are you familiar with tocotrienols?
We do.
Yeah, tocotrienols are a form of vitamin E, and vitamin E is a family that includes tocopherols and tocotrienols. So tocotrienols have some unique properties. So I'm a big believer in tocotrienols.
And why statins at night?
Because the body tends to produce, the liver tends to produce cholesterol at night. Niacin, as I mentioned, niacin is an amazing nutrient that has all these benefits for cardiovascular health. So niacin is one of the few ingredients, as I mentioned, it can lower Elkin weight, it can increase HDL. It's one of the few things that can take a smaller dense LDL particle and make it bigger. We use modest dosages like 500 milligrams, and at that level, there's very few potential side effects. It was common for cardiologists to prescribe niacin. Typically, they would be using 2 grams, sometimes 3 grams, and at that level, sometimes there are some side effects. Of course, at any level, you might get some flushing, but flushing is not harmful. Plant sterols are another good supplement that inhibits cholesterol absorption. That would do 1 to 3 grams a day. Berberine is an amazing supplement for cardiovascular health. It's one of the few things that has been shown to reverse plaque in published studies. And as I mentioned, berberine is natural metformin. It's also a natural PCSK9 inhibitor. This study showed 3.2% reversal of plaque in 4 months just taking berberine. Citrus bergamot is another one to add. You have a patient on registries and you're not getting the amount of improvement you want. Add citrus bergamot. Omega-3 fish oils, super important. Despite some of the studies that are coming out of the New England Journal of Medicine or the EMA Journal, ever notice that there's like 100 studies that have come out in the last several years on the benefits of fish oil, but the 2 that show that fish oil is not beneficial or harmful, those are the ones published in the Journal of Medicine. So I think there's just overwhelming evidence that omega-3 fats are beneficial. Yep.
What do you think of krill versus a combination of fish?
So my understanding is most of the data supports a sufficient amount of omega-3, at least 2 grams a day. You would have to take like 25 krill capsules to get 2 grams. So unless you want to take that much, I say get a good quality, high dose fish oil, 1,000 milligrams triglyceride form. Ramen sulfate or fucotin sulfate. So those are seaweeds that are included in specific supplements that help to support the glycocalyx of the endothelium. And so one of them is called Arterial cell, is a very popular one. Endocalyx Pro, Regenivasc. These are supplements that specifically are going to reduce your risk of coronary artery disease, help significantly with blood pressure. You also want to include a nitric oxide stimulator. Those are super important for blood pressure as well. I mentioned the importance of glycocalyx for producing nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas that's produced for a short period of time, but we can use things like L-citrulline, beetroot, some other things that stimulate nitric oxide. Glucosamine and sulfate. Glucosamine sulfate and chondroitin sulfate. These are popular joint supplements. They have been shown to support the glycocalyx. So I mentioned the glycocalyx is composed of significant reduction in risk. Look at this, 39% reduction in all-cause mortality, 65% reduction in cardiovascular mortality from taking glucosamine sulfate. It's amazing. I don't know why everybody's not talking about this. When I saw this study come out, now it was another study that came out last year. I emailed Joel Kahn. He said, "Wow, is this real?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, "There's 3-4 other studies." So put all the patients on glucosamine sulfate. Aged heart rate is also beneficial. Can reduce soft plaque, is one of the few things that reduces hardening of the arteries, helps with blood pressure. Nattokinase, I mentioned, is a natural blood thinner. CoQ10 also helps. I mentioned it helps to lower Lp(a). It supports the heart muscle, mitochondria. Part of a program to rebuild a patient with heart failure. Includes CoQ10, D-ribose, L-carnitine, at high dosages. Methylated B vitamins to lower homocysteine. Lycopene improves HDL functionality. Dr. Houston developed a supplement with 20 milligrams of lycopene and several other nutrients for one of the companies. A little bit more, a few specific nutritional strategies. To lower LPA, I think I mentioned most of these. What do you do about oxidized LPL? Yes, it helps. So does pomegranate. There's some supplements on the market that contain pomegranate and some other antioxidants, resveratrol, citrus bergamot, tocotrienols, curcumin. How to improve HDL functionality? I just mentioned lycopene, omega-3, anethine is a B vitamin. So here are some books that I recommend. Dr. Houston's book. This is Johnny Gowden's book. Johnny's right here in our audience. Johnny is a very prolific author. He's written like 15 different books. He wrote this with Dr. Sinatra. About a year and a half ago, actually, Johnny and Dr. Elkin and Dr. Sinatra's son and I, we all did a tribute to Dr. Sinatra when he died. We did a podcast together. So here's a book by Dr. Sinatra. There's another book by Dr. Mark Houston. This is Joel Kahn's book about Lp(a). And Mark Houston has some amazing articles where he writes, lists all these different supplements and how they correlate, what supplements affect what pathways. So great resource. If you take a course from Dr. Houston, teaches Alpha E4M, you should definitely do it. So thank you. Please subscribe to my podcast. Tell your colleagues about these meetings. They're very educational. We're getting great speakers. And it's costs nothing. It's a great way to network. Let's get back to networking. Pandemic's over. Time to get back in person and support Integrative Therapeutics, our sponsor. Thank you. Yeah. Great job. Thank you.
Well, I'm to change what's in the outline. I would take some young children in Alfred who are capable of going on rightly, recommend them for high schooling. As a result, they're accumulating that kids haven't been mentors have recommended she did I tell them to donate, and it seems to help.
Right. So the question is, somebody who's storing iron, how to get rid of it. One way is to donate blood. It's often recommended for men who are taking testosterone if that hemoglobin starts going up, and it can be done for hemochromatosis or stored iron. Also, test patients' genes, see if they have one of the hemochromatosis genes. There's actually 3 different genes for hemochromatosis. I did 2 podcasts. There's a book called The Iron Curse. great book on iron overload and hemochromatosis. So check out the Iron Curse. We did 2 podcasts with the doctor who wrote that. Okay. Yep.
There's nobody like Dr. Elkin, but is there any way that he can come close from the valley to the west side?
You know, it's so hard. We've been trying to find there's very few integrative cardiologists. There's very few integrative specialists in the country. Cynthia Thaik, Thaik. You have to Elkin.
Person who's love to watch you debate their meetings. I mean, she gets the root cause like everybody else. But what's her name? Amy Dominey. Oh, you got Grant's nurse practitioner, though she was global. Yeah.
So, I put Cynthia Thaik in touch with Dr. Elkin's daughter. To
talk to Annie.
Now, of course, Cynthia doesn't prescribe hormones. How many cardiologists prescribe hormones? Most of them don't. Yeah, right.
Okay, it's to be wrong, but you look at much to Europe, I think there's pre-vascular disease was what death rates is less than ours, and needle-taking and so.
Okay. Okay.
So what is this about?
That's good for them.
Now knows helping people. After it's so stress.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable our lifestyles.
That would look right.
I mean,
They work to live. They work.
Exactly. I remember I was years ago. I was on the soccer sideline talking to this other dad. He was from France, and he's now CEO. And he said, "Yeah, I'm going to go on vacation for 3 weeks." What? You can't do that. He goes, "What are you talking about? We in France, we go on vacation for 6 weeks. They go for 2 weeks, they come back, they're planning their next vacation here. If you want to go on vacation for a week, it's like, what do you mean? You can't do that."
Yeah.
Just in what I thought, go through the quality of the food, the way that they process the food. I mean, it's everything. Oh, Francie, they're like, oh, no, and I'm not in theory. Now I see food. I was like, yeah, sure, but
We not only spray our food with glyphosate, we won't even allow, we can't even get a bill passed to have them label it as being genetically modified or sprayed with glyphosate. So,
Well, not each there.
yeah,
You know, I know you didn't mention the Valen domain of it. So,
okay.
are you familiar with that at all?
It sounds familiar, but I can't think of what it is.
Just talk about the
domain method. Yeah, they've written a couple of really good books. They really look at root cause analysis, really like nobody else I've ever seen. So Bradley Bales in Texas, Amy Dominey is with Spokane, Washington. We know them. And she actually, it's an all cash practice. If you have a cardiovascular risk, she refunds your money. That's how confident she is about stabilizing and reversing your cardiovascular.
They focus on root cause inflammation.
Okay.
Inflammation, blood sugar, yeah, all of. But I haven't seen anybody else do that. And I personally see her, their course, and I personally see her.
Yeah, we've seen that. Trains.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to leave, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you for making it all the way through this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. For those of you who enjoy listening to the Rational Wellness Podcast, I would very much appreciate it if you could go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us a 5-star ratings and review. As you may know, I continue to accept a limited number of new patients per month for functional medicine. If you would like help overcoming a gut or other chronic health condition and want to prevent chronic problems and want to promote longevity, please call my Santa Monica Weitz Sports Chiropractic and Nutrition office at 310-395-3111, and we can set you up for a consultation for functional medicine. And I will talk to everybody next week.